Very good evening and welcome everybody to Science Chats once again. Today I have something very interesting to offer to you through this conversation. And I have a very special as well. With this immense upliftment and advancement with technology and the buzzword artificial intelligence. I think this is one word which actually tickles all of our neurons. What do you say? So, not wasting any more time, I will tell you who is my guest before I call my guest in. So today I have Dr. Anoop Kulkarni, the founder of Innotomy Consulting. Anoop has over 25 years of professional experience in varied domains, from telecom to energy to healthcare, through the lens of data science and AI. He co-founded Amplet Energy Solutions Private Limited, a company focused on energy efficiency solutions for commercial sector. His consulting firm, that is Innotomy Consulting, focuses on data science projects and use of AI and machine learning in healthcare. Anoop is a hands-on developer of products and solutions, and Anoop has a PhD in computer from IIT Bombay and an M.Tech and BE in electronics and communication. Well, so here, let me see if my guest I could just see. Very good evening, Anoop. How are you doing?
Hi, good
Hi.
evening and nice. I hope the audio is working.
Yes, it is absolutely fine.
Great.
Anoop, thank you so much for joining in today in spite of your busy schedule. And I think we have I've got a quite lot of interest when I put this poster away when we are talking about artificial intelligence, and that too in perspective of dentistry. And as I know that your consultant firm is focusing particularly with AI into healthcare. So I thought that this science chat today would be best to call you in and have insights from you as an expert. So Anoop,
Thank you.
straight
Thank you
away,
for
I
having me.
will. Thank you so much. So Anoop, straight away, I will shoot my questions to you, not wasting any time. So
Yeah.
the first very basic question, Anoop, is what exactly is this AI or artificial intelligence?
That's a tough one to start with because because it's not a it's unlike your classical physics or laws of motion kind of stuff, which is everything is known for 300 years, 400 years, and you
Right.
kind of go on teaching it year after year. This is unlike that. It's not a concept. I mean, it's not an entity. It is more like an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody tells you that they know what AI is and give you a kind of a siloed or a boxed answer that this is AI and this is not AI, I don't
Uh-huh.
think they are telling the full truth. So
Okay.
I wouldn't want to do that either. So I wouldn't want to actually say that this is the definition of artificial intelligence, but I would just give you some ideas around that so that it is the so that the notion is a little more clearer, right? I mean, when I was doing my PhD, there was this computer scientist by name Alan Perlis, and one of his quotes. I mean, this was in the 90s. Of course, we have moved a lot in AI since then, in the last 10 years, especially so. But I think generally at a top level, his one of his quotation holds very true. So, what is AI? So he said, if you spend a year in artificial intelligence, then that is good enough to make you start believing in God. So, it's like that, right? I mean,
That's
that
very
was
well
that was that was the case in 90s for sure. It is that much closer to people now, with everybody carrying a smartphone and everybody using all kinds of technologies. I think everyone in the audience, I'm pretty sure, will have an idea themselves of what artificial intelligence is. So there is no reason for me to kind of give a separate definition, really, because people use all kinds of things like gallery or photo gallery on their apps, whether it is Android or whether it is iOS or whatever, and you can already start seeing that it starts. grouping photographs together based on certain person who appears in that photo, and you kind of get a collection of all the photos in which that particular face appears in. That's face recognition at its core, which is primarily a computer vision concept, which is also attributed to artificial intelligence. People use Google Assistant or Siri or Alexa, whatever, all of them in the form of a language that we speak is artificial intelligence. Some of your notes, the physician notes that you
Yes.
write on papers, if they can be interpreted and stored in a particular form, that would be artificial intelligence too. So I wouldn't want to kind of give a very boxed answer, but it might just be interesting to go back in history and think of who introduced this term artificial intelligence in the first place, because artificial intelligence, it has become a buzzword in last 5 years more so, but last 10 years more or less. But it's not that it has been there only for those many years. It's been there for donkey's years now. 50s, Professor John McCarthy of MIT, he actually was the first person who introduced this term called artificial intelligence. And at the time, he was speaking about problems in science and engineering, uh, which can be solved by making machines think or making machines intelligent. That was his idea of what an artificial intelligence system is. I think today, as we speak, I think it is pretty much still the same definition, same notion. Basically, trying to extract some intelligence that we attribute to humans from a machine is essentially what artificial intelligence is, and it comes in various forms and flavors, but that's really the crux of it.
Thank you, Anoop. That was a very well explained, I must say, not definition, but I think an idea about AI. And that means we actually carry AI in hand and also in our daily life, like as you explained very well.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah. So Anup, now with this buzzwords like AI is one, then we also keep seeing about machine learning, which you also mentioned, and data science. So my question is that are these present day buzzwords are they same or they are different?
Again, definitional side of it. So it's difficult to kind of box them together. If you do a Google search for each of these three terms, you'll get 100 images, pretty much drawn in the same way in different colors, etc. But which essentially shows that uh, at a Venn level diagram, uh, AI is this larger sphere within which you have a little of a circle of machine learning, within which there is a little circle called deep learning, and the whole thing that look from outside is kind of data science. I mean, that kind of diagrams you would see if you do a Google search even now. But that is not really my take on what really AI and machine learning is or data science is. So, for example, if you had actually asked me this question 3 or 4 years ago, probably the answer would have been very similar to what you see on Google today. Uh, because at that time people were siloed in particular ways looking at fields, but it's become a lot more interdisciplinary and a lot more, not just from an usage point of view, but even from an application, from a technology point of view itself. There are very thin lines that divide these things. So my narration would be like that it is more of a branding exercise, and I'll explain what I mean by it being a branding exercise. So when John McCarthy, I mentioned, talked about artificial intelligence in the 50s, there was this whole wave that there are these machines now that are going to exist which are going to start solving all these problems. There was this perceptron which came from Cornell University within in late 50s, that led to a belief that, oh, here is now one device which is now going to solve all our problems. So media is media, just as bad it is today. It was particularly bad even that time as well, and there were lots of there were lots of articles that were carried that our pawns or the soldiers, frontline soldiers, are going to be these small robots which are going to be those small perceptrons that were designed, and we are going to fight a war where there are these robotic warfare is going to happen. These are 60s. This is New York Times in 60s. So
Okay.
so people haven't changed. People have, or rather, I should say, people were no different that time either. So, but that said, uh, the problem was there was a it hit a roadblock. That whole architecture that was defined hit a roadblock. The interesting story is that there were two authors, Marvin Minsky and Papert, who wrote a book. And the idea of their writing that book was to celebrate the design, the discovery, or whatever you call it, the invention of this perceptron. But
Hmm.
as they wrote the book, they actually killed it, because in one of the few chapters later in the book, they actually proved that this is not going to be useful or not going to be sufficient to solve the problems. So that led to a phase which is called as AI winter. AI winters are those periods when there is nobody talks about AI. So all
Okay.
the newspapers which were carrying these great articles of army generals who are going to use these robots suddenly stopped talking about it. Suddenly the funding dried up, and nobody was talking about it because suddenly this book claimed that this perceptron can't solve this problem.
Okay.
So so there was a lull. And then when you want to revive a field, what do you do? So I come back to my point of branding, right? So they said,
Yes.
rather than trying to solve these logical problems and trying to build these machines which are like humanoids, like who behave, think, talk like humans, which is going to
Hmm.
be a very big challenge, let's start focusing on some specific problems and see if they can do better at that than humans do.
Hmm.
And obviously, if you want funding, you can't go back and say this is artificial intelligence again. So so they called it machine learning. So
Right.
machine learning was basically the same thing, regurgitated into a different form.
All
Uh,
right.
Not exactly the logical models that artificial intelligence was talking about, but the specific tasks that you do perform, in which the machine does better. Uh, and you are not programming the machine to do the exact same task again and again. So based on data, it changes and it gives you predictions which are different. So that became machine learning. Machine learning hit another roadblock by our late 90s, 2000s, and then pretty much whatever there was to be discovered was discovered, primarily coming from a statistical point standpoint. So in 2006, these three fellows who got a mm, Turing Award in 2019, Bengio, Lekun, and Jeffrey Hinton of the Google, they got together for a conference which was called NIPS that time, which is called NeurIPS these days. It's a very popular conference in machine learning and artificial intelligence. And they coined a new term which
Hmm.
became deep learning, which was the third exercise in branding. Now, deep learning was an idea which had not
Hmm.
yet been proven. So it took
Hmm.
another 6 years, like till 2012, when the real watershed moment came for it, and deep learning became very successful on an imaginary subject. We can talk about it later in details about those things. But one moment in history which became very specific for the success of deep learning, and then
Hmm.
it started getting called as deep learning. So now here is this branding problem. You start from AI,
Right.
change it to machine learning,
Hmm.
change it to deep learning. Then somewhere around 2004, somebody introduced data science.
Okay.
Without for short of a term to 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 describe whatever they were doing, which was neither this nor that nor that. So something else, but which still deals with data. So it was called data science, and it has now come full circle because people are now there are two camps literally in the research community. Those who
Right.
think that these specific tasks that you perform, whether it is aggregation of photographs or doing
Hmm.
something specific machine learning tasks, whether you perform with a statistical approach like in machine learning or with a deep learning approach as Lekun and Hinton talked about. Either way, the problem is you are still solving a very specific problem, and you are still nowhere close to what the true idea of artificial intelligence was. That you should have a system which is capable of thinking like humans.
Right.
So now you can't go back and call it artificial intelligence again. So now it's
Correct.
called artificial general intelligence or AGI. Now,
Okay.
artificial general intelligence is supposed to be the same AI that was there in the 1950s.
Hmm.
But it's just that because of the evolution of the terminology, it had to be called something else other than AI. And it became AGI. And the idea of AGI is how do you bring in the notions of emotions, consciousness,
Right.
imagination, memory that are
Hmm.
unique to humans
Hmm.
and make machines think and do things differently. But to sorry to have taken a little longer for this question,
No
but
problem.
just to conclude on that, uh, I think let's also think of your audience who are listening to this, right? So they
Yes.
are the users of this system, if ever they decide to use it. So they would be the consumers, as they call it in the consumer producer terminology. So they are the consumers of this technology. Now, for them, I don't think there is any difference between AI and machine learning and deep learning. These terms are anyway used interchangeably even amongst researchers in the field. But
Okay.
especially from a user point of view, I don't think it makes any difference what you call it, as long as it solves your specific problem. So if for them as a consumer, anything would be AI, anything would
Hmm.
be machine learning, anything would be deep learning.
All right.
So I
Okay.
don't know
That
if
was
I've answered that question, but
definitely.
yeah,
No, I think we got a very clear idea because generally, since we, particularly healthcare professionals, we are not from the field, and
yeah,
we generally think these terminologies. It comes like bloopers to us because we think that there are a lot more inside. And now your explanations makes life simple and things simple. Well, so, so Anoop, as a domain expert yourself, how do you see AI applications in the healthcare sector?
so healthcare is unique. Uh, it's unique because you are dealing with patients at the end of the day, and you do not want uh, things to go wrong, or you do not want a situation where an AI system or a software is giving you certain recommendation, and that recommendation is going to harm, quote unquote, harm that patient, not necessarily in a very drastic way, but even in small ways. You don't
Right.
want that to happen.
Correct.
So healthcare in general, medicine in general, probably dentistry in particular, is a very slow adapting field for any new technology. Uh, and there is a reason for that, and that reason is what I just mentioned, because you are dealing with patients at the end of the day. So the challenges are very unique for healthcare, and I will say healthcare, medicine, dentistry, all in synonymously. But unlike, let's say, for example, a gaming situation, or where you're trying to just detect objects in image, you're just trying to, let's say, tag an image by as saying that this is a boat on the floor of a sea or ocean or something. I mean,
Hmm.
those kind of, even if it says it's not a boat or something else,
Yeah.
it's not going to hurt anybody. But
Correct.
in healthcare, it will hurt if you get a diagnosis wrong,
Correct.
and that is why I think this is unique space. One is clearly one can understand the apprehensions of the community, which is physicians and dentists and whoever. Clearly, they have a barrier they need to cross. But even the systems have to cross that barrier and kind of give that confidence to these people that that system is not going to go and make a false claim, or if it is going to make a claim about or a prediction about something, then it should at least do it in such a way that it allows the decision making finally in the hands of the human expert. It
Right.
should just be an additional input. I mean, there has been a lot of nonsensical talk about how AI is going to replace radiologists and stuff like that. I think that
Yes.
discussion has kind of toned down now. It was
Hmm.
big hyperactive discussion in the 20s, 1918, 2018, 19 time frame. But
Correct.
now I think people have realized that that kind of making tall claim is not a good idea. So I think the final uh, stuff decision making should lie with the human experts.
Hmm.
But the system can give inputs. For example, humans will be stressed. Humans may not be operate at scale. So those are the
Right.
situations where the system can give you a little quick jump start.
Correct.
It is for you as a doctor to take that input or ignore it, which
Absolutely.
is which is which is which is why it is a little different in healthcare.
Hmm.
And also from the technology point of view, just to complete the question on the technology side of it,
Hmm.
also it is not very easy because the kind of data sets that you need to work on
Hmm.
are not very easily accessible.
Correct.
You may have IRB issues, you may have ethics issues, you may need to de-anonymize the data sets. There is a lot of privacy and stuff involved. Most of
Yes.
the data comes from US, so there is a HIPAA compliance which is required. So it's not easy to just get a data set. And at the end
Correct.
of the day, my problem is with healthcare is, especially in India, and because that's why I'm very hopeful that this is just an early start, and like hopefully the next decade will be a sea change in the way we treat artificial intelligence in this country.
Hmm.
But the problem is most of the research happens in the US, in the Boston area and around.
Correct.
And you have those data sets, and now you can't take learnings from those data sets and apply it to Indian patients. You need
Absolutely.
data from the Indian patients. So if
Yes.
it's going to take time to collect the data, so be it. So
Mhm.
technology development also is going to be slow in healthcare. Its adaptation is also going to be slower in healthcare. So yeah,
Okay. So, Anoop, I just want to know that when it comes to learning, like
yeah.
for example, there are certain subjects which people, if they want, they can take up some courses and they learn by themselves or maybe taking some help. So when it comes to AI, I wanted to know that can anyone learn AI, or it is very, very domain specific, meaning to say that you really need some basic qualifications to understand the subject as such.
I wouldn't say you need uh, domain knowledge as such.
Okay.
Anybody, my guess is anybody should be able to do this. You remember the field of bioinformatics, which came up a few years ago because
Yes.
of and the way it was pitched was that biologists don't understand
Correct.
comp scientists don't understand biology, so they both meet midway, and then they created bioinformatics. It's a
Hmm.
classic use case of how it should not be done,
Hmm.
uh, and I think people are learning from that experience. At the worst thing that you can possibly do, I mean, and I come from computer science background
Correct.
myself, but I
Hmm.
would still say it, sticking my neck out, that it's not correct to hand over your problem to computer scientists because they just don't have an idea of how the domain operates.
Exactly.
It has
Hmm.
to be done by you as
Hmm.
in whoever it is in that field, whether it is healthcare, they know the problem best. If you are
Right.
talking about dentists, they know the problems of their patients best. They know
Correct.
exactly what is the pattern of what kind of solution is required, and they
Hmm.
should be involved in designing a solution for this. They don't have to necessarily code it themselves, they can still get it done from others, but they
Hmm.
need to be on top of the problem. And I think with the kind of generation that we have now, of the young
Hmm.
generations coming through, I think everybody is pretty computer savvy. So
Yes.
programming is pretty much part of ingrained in everybody's mind pretty early on. So I
Hmm.
don't think it is very difficult to pick up that one. I mean, surely, if people do PhDs in AI and machine learning, so it is that kind of a field which is vast. But you don't need to know zillion things. I mean, I think somebody said that, right? If you're trying
Yes.
to learn a new field, you don't need to learn zillion things that exist in that field. You just need to understand core five and six concepts, and then you
Exactly.
realize that zillion things are just a manifestation of those five, six core things. So you should be able to know those five, six core things, and I think people can program without having any background in this. I think I'm pretty sure of that.
Okay, I think that's a very brighter, promising area that you have highlighted, and it's very, very good to know that. So, Anup, the other day when I was discussing with you about conducting this particular event today, so if you remember that we were we were planning to bring up some learning courses for particularly for the dental professionals. So uh, if you would highlight that a bit for all our audience, because here mostly we have dental faculty, students, freshers, early career researchers who would be watching this video. So I think we have something in bag to offer to all of you. So I think Anoop, if you just give an idea about it to our
Yeah, so
audience.
we were talking about it, and we kind of haven't kind of fully detailed it out yet. But the
Yes,
idea is that we kind of do some sessions, maybe some hands-on sessions, where you introduce some of these concepts in machine learning, deep learning. I mean, if somebody says machine learning and somebody says deep learning, you should at least know what is what and what it
yes,
does. I mean, it's important to demystify these terminologies and understand what the core technology. That's the same thing that I talked about just now, of understanding
exactly.
those five, six core principles. You need to understand those. So maybe we could run a session, where we could run a series where we kind of introduce these terminologies and these things in a particular way. We can make it hands-on so that whoever is interested can execute those things themselves and pick up on their own in their free time.
Yes,
And because you are a dental community, we could follow it up with another series where we just take specific projects in dentistry, some public data sets that are available,
yes,
learn those data sets, understand what the limitations of those data sets are, discuss what kind of research questions you can pose, what kind of solutions you can identify, and then go ahead and implement them as a project, as a group project, or as individuals, whichever way.
right.
So it's a kind of a long term idea,
Yeah,
uh, but I think it will help. And as you mentioned, that there are most of these are freshers, students,
yes.
faculty, early stage career people.
Hmm.
I think for them, the most exciting thing is that the next decade is going to be the decade of uh, uh, pretty much AI, if I can call it that way, especially
Yes,
in dentistry and healthcare, and especially in India. And I think, given that, it is imperative that they are on top of it. So it's not
absolutely.
just a matter of whether they would want to do it or not. I would sincerely urge them to take it up and do it.
Correct.
Take the bull by the horns, as they say it, and then they'll realize that it's not a bull, but it's a mere friendly animal.
Absolutely. That's very well put. So, so Anoop, just coming to the almost to the concluding part of our discussion today.
Yep.
So, can you highlight the scope of artificial intelligence or AI, particularly in the field of dentistry?
Okay. So it is something which, I think I'll give some ideas that I kind of can think of, but I would also like to make a small request to you, uh, through you to your audience.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because they are the experts in dentistry, and as I
Yes.
just said, it's not good to leave this in the hands of computer scientists like me. So I would say that whenever they kind of listen to this discussion or whatever, over the next 1 week or so, if
Hmm.
they can think of a problem which they think is something which requires a different solution, like an AI is kind of a solution,
Right.
then they can submit it through you to us. We can kind of implement some of them as even project ideas in the course that we talked about.
Correct.
But really, I mean, come to think of it, I mean, there are basically broad fields. You have imaging, you have radiographs, most of it 2D 3D kind of imaging, where you do uh, lots of stuff which is analysis of images, teeth arrangements, teeth sequencing.
Hmm.
Then there are these decisions that you need to do as orthodontists to kind of remove, or they extract the tooth, and at what time you need to do it.
Hmm.
Typically, this is an exercise that you leave it in the hands of senior physicians, professional dentists who, through experience, know when is the right time to do it. But early
Correct.
stage researchers may not know it. So,
Hmm.
can they get an input from an AI system which kind of tells them and trains them as they get along, and then eventually become the experts that they would be? I mean, that's something that's a kind of an example that you can develop
Mm-hmm.
by looking at some data sets, some images, right? Then on just the restorations that you do, right?
Yes.
Whatever fillings and all that, the material that you use, etc. It
Hmm.
has a finite shelf life.
Hmm.
These things don't live forever. So, what kind
Right.
of material you should use so that you can increase the longevity of this, for example,
Hmm.
could be a decision that can come from an AI system. Then you
Oh,
design the whole thing around it yourself.
that's
Then
very
there's a
interesting.
field, yeah, then there's a field called generative adversarial networks, which is
Okay.
now currently being trialed to design very personalized dentures. For example, every person's uh, currently, I think you do it through using molds and stuff like that, but
Yes. Yes.
but this is primarily through imaging, and you can kind of create much better fitting
Hmm.
uh, uh,
More
gadgets,
customer. Yeah.
more
Hmm.
customized for specific people. So that is another thing that you can do. And then there is this evaluation that you keep doing in terms of what should be the length of your root canal.
Hmm.
That's something which you take, which again comes through experience. But can
Right.
imaging data set help you come up with a system which
Hmm.
suggests to you that maybe this is the right length for root canal?
Okay.
And then you
I
take a
think
call again. I mean, it primarily helps early stage researchers again.
absolutely. I think these are very fascinating areas or the points that examples you have given. Uh, so I think it's very very promising. And so so Anup, coming to the last question.
Okay.
So yeah, if a dentist or a dental student wish to pursue a career in AI, what should be the first step to start with?
It depends on what stage they are at in
Hmm.
dentistry also.
Hmm.
I mean, if they are early stage and just coming out of college,
College.
etc., probably the experience may not be there.
Hmm.
So they might just want to work with some clinics, etc., to just collect the data sets, and so that they can
Okay.
start developing these systems in parallel.
Hmm.
So that is one way. As a developer of a technology, I think
Hmm.
anybody can do that in their free time also. Uh, there is depending on their drive and their interest in the field, I think they can pick up the ideal. There is no silver bullet, as they say, for this, but
Hmm.
the solution I think is pretty much you start with some very top level programming by collecting the data,
Hmm.
formulating your application idea, and then get into the, if at all you are interested, if they are interested, to get into the math side of it. But I don't think maths is critical for this, for
Okay.
developing applications in this field. I
Right.
think they can just do it through simple programming.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
think they can take some online courses. I can suggest them. I mean, we are anyway going to do our own course,
Right.
so we can give them ideas as to how they can do this, uh,
Take it
the
further.
jumpstart themselves. Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, I think that was really nice, and learning. I mean, I think today we got very clear ideas, and all those cloudy things regarding these buzzwords. I think that has been completely waved off. And Anup, there is one question in the audience. So if you tell, then I can take it up.
yeah, yeah.
If so, we have Dr. Shabana who asks that AI with respect to oral pathology.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Now,
she maybe
uh,
wants to know that where in oral pathology, basically where we see tissues under the microscope, to put it in a very layman terms.
yeah.
How do we? Is there any application of AI there?
So if you look at pathology per se, I mean, not
Hmm.
necessarily oral pathology,
Hmm.
histopathology, for example,
Yes.
uh, there's a lot of work which is already done in developing AI technology to
Hmm.
understand these whole slide sequences.
Okay.
And and the way it works is you take your historical data of all the slides,
Okay.
and let's say you are trying to analyze them for, let's say, oral cancer, just an
Mm-hmm.
example,
Yes.
and then you let the pathologist, what we call as annotate, you let them annotate in the sense that on the image of the
Hmm.
slide you make them surround that area where they think the cancer is developing, etc. And
Okay.
these kind of images with these annotations, they can then kind of become your training data for your system. And
Hmm.
then the system kind of learns from this, and then it sees a new image or a new
Hmm.
slide. Then maybe it
Hmm.
will be able to tell from these learnings as to whether there is there is a developing cancer or malformed tissues here or there
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
the sequence. So I'm not quite aware of people having used having used AI in oral pathology, but
Okay.
I doubt why it should be any different from the normal pathology. So I'm pretty sure it should work. We could do
Okay.
that as one idea actually, if there are enough slide data available.
Absolutely. So I think Dr. Shabana, you got your answer, and I think it's a. I see the future of dentistry, particularly when it comes with technology and all. It's very very bright. So it's just that we adapt to this and keep ourselves open to new learning and explore these areas.
It's bright and also it's a green field right now,
Yes,
uh,
absolutely.
especially in our country because we don't, as I said, we don't have the data sets so far. So some bunch of enthusiasts will have to come together, put together these data sets, make them public and stuff like that for the benefit of the larger community, and I'm sure
Correct.
everybody will benefit.
Absolutely. So, thank you, Anoop. So, today we will conclude and we'll keep meeting and we come up with such interesting interactions with you in the future, near future as well. And
Yep.
thank you so much once again for giving your time. And it was
Thank
wonderful
you.
learning from you.
Thank you. Thanks again. Thanks again for having me, and it was good fun.
Thank you, Anoop. So
Thank
thank you
you.
everybody for joining in. And so with that, today we end our science chats, and I hope it was useful to you. And if you have any questions further on, if you're watching this video in the recorded version, put put it in the comments under the video so that we will get back to you with your answers as well. Thank you so much for watching and staying tuned with us. Good night. Take care. Bye bye. Bye.